Hey guys, how's it going? So today I wanted to try something a little bit different and make a guide on how to die less in Dota 2. Now I've been reading a lot of guides and studying a lot of replays in order to compile this sort of mega guide, and I'm really excited to hear what you think because I want to make more of these. They're really a lot of fun. So let me know what I should add and how can I improve for my next one. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the ins and outs of Dota 2 survival. So right off the bat, let's talk about some of the benefits of staying alive in Dota. First and foremost, the less you die, the less gold you give away to your enemy. Secondly, as a carry, the more time you spend alive, the more time you spend farming. However, this is not an excuse for supports to say, well, I'm a support, so it's okay if I give up a few deaths here and there, right? Like, it's okay if I end the game at 0-17. No, it's not. Because what you may not realize is that for every death you give up, your carry isn't protected, you can't ward, you can't stack, you can't use any of your spells because you're dead, and you can't defend against pushes. Supports need to stay alive just as much as carries do, and especially during the laning phase and in team fights where they're needed most. If you give up a few deaths early, the enemy will outlevel you, making it harder for you to get XP safely or win fights. So by reducing the amount of times you die in a game, you can boost your MMR significantly. However, I'm not saying this is going to be an easy task. It requires an incredible amount of map awareness, skill, and item build knowledge when people get their timings, when people hit their power spikes, along with a general understanding of how vision is granted. So in this video, I'll be attempting to cover some of the basic and not so basic concepts that pros have perfected in order to give up the least amount of deaths every single game. So first things first, let's talk about lane sustain. We've all had a game where you spawn in as a carry without any support, and to your surprise, suddenly the enemy is running an aggressive tri-lane with Lion, Luna, and Shadow Shaman. You've got a lot of stuns, they've got a lot of disables, it's hard, it's 20 minutes in, you're 0-6-0 with 13 last hits, right? And you just stop and think, man, if I hadn't given up 6 deaths, we might actually be ahead by now. I mean, they had to run an aggressive tri-lane to shut down one hero. See, the most basic reason new players die in lane is because they didn't bring enough health or mana regen. As a result, they're stuck between having to go back to base or dying, which is both inefficient for earning gold and XP. Now, it's pretty basic to resolve this problem obviously, it's just you have to plan ahead. During the picking phase, try for a carry that has a high lane sustain, like a PA so she can last hit with her dagger, or a Juggernaut with his healing ward. If you end up actually playing support, consider their lineup and then pick accordingly. If you sense an aggressive offlaner or ganker, go for someone like a Lion to counter-initiate and get a turnaround kill. If they plan on playing a hero that chips away at your regen and takes good trades, like a Bristleback or something, consider Dazzle or Oracle for their strong heals and saving abilities. Once in lane, and especially in solo queue, pick up both a set of Tangos and a Salve. Alternatively, you could pick up one set of Tangos and 2 Ironwood branches. This gives you stats early, but they can also be consumed for double regen on a Tango. The other thing to keep in mind during laning is creep aggro and harassing the opponent. Now this is huge for lane sustain. See, creep aggro is a set of rules that determine when an enemy lane creep will attack you. The rules are as follows. If you issue an attack command within 500 range of the creep, not the enemy hero, they will move to attack you. The aggro lasts 2.5 seconds, and if you attack outside of the 500 range, it will only draw aggro after 2 seconds of your first attack doing damage. Since you're incredibly weak early on, taking damage from creeps can make each of your right clicks on the enemy worthwhile for him, provided he brought enough regen of course. So you want to abuse these creep rules instead of seeing them as a barricade, to attack him without A, the creeps being able to attack you, and B, him being able to trade. Now this is really tricky and it's definitely an art you have to master, but I'll give you an example. If I attack the enemy mid within 500 range of his creeps and then back off and attack from my high ground, anytime he wants to attack back, he'll draw aggro from my creeps, meaning he's taking damage from me and 3 or 4 other units. Once you understand these rules and perfect them, the possibilities to outplay and survive your opponents in lane are endless. Next up, let's talk about a major aspect of the early to mid game, ganking. Now, ganking is how a lot of lineups secure early game objectives, map control, and find pickoffs. Giving up a death that leads into losing a tower could be your minus 25 MMR right then and there, so avoiding these key moments is precious. However, predicting ganks is not at all easy, and you have to have a strong understanding of map awareness and power spikes of different enemy heroes, and that mostly comes from experience. So let's start off with the most basic gank, one from a safe lane support roaming into the mid. The best way to predict these kind of ganks is to check your minimap often. You can check it anytime you go for a last hit, get a rune, stack a camp, just make sure you always have your eyes on the enemy supports. And you're thinking to yourself, but what about when they go into their jungle to stack or pull? How do I know they're not coming to kill me? Well, if you're not sure whether they're stacking or coming to kill you, next you have to think about their motives. Any good roamer will recognize when their target is strong and when they're weak. They'll attempt to kill you when you're weak and avoid you when you're strong. This means your job is to identify these power spikes for yourself and play around them. If you're 200 experience away from level 8 on a Quasic Zord Invoker, meaning you're about to get your second Forge Spirit, and notice a Crystal Maiden missing at the 53-second mark, try standing back for a few seconds. If she shows up to the lane, that means she was just stacking. If she doesn't, play passively until you can see her again. On the same subject, recognizing enemy power spikes is just as, if not more important than recognizing your own. Did Void just get level 6? He might be coming for your safe lane, so try to keep yourself and your support out of Chronosphere range so he can save you if he comes. Did you last see Axe with boots and tangos 12 minutes ago? He might be just on the verge of getting a blink dagger in the jungle, and he can come out any minute to land a dream blink call. Try retreating back to the inner parts of your jungle and farm there until you see him again. And obviously I can't explain all of these to you, so the faster you understand what the enemy is trying to accomplish, the better you can play around them. One final tip for avoiding ganks is to look at their lineup during the first minute before the rune spawns. Identify a hero or group of heroes that can kill you during the early, mid, and late game. For example, if you're an anti-mage against an OD with an Orchid, you can play aggressively whenever you see him on the map, even if the other 4 heroes are missing. However, if he's missing while the other 4 heroes are present, it's probably a good idea to look for safer farm behind your towers, wards, and creep waves. Now you know all that, great. But let's say you're not the greatest player in the world and you can't predict every single gank throughout the early game. That's fine. I have a very basic tip that a lot of players ignore that can keep you safe in a ton of different circumstances. This is super basic, you ready? Use your creep wave to protect you. You've probably heard the term creep equilibrium, right? Which is basically where the creeps are and where they should be. In the early game, you want to keep your creeps as close to your tower as possible, no matter the lane you're in. Although this doesn't give us much vision, it makes the area between your farm and your tower much smaller, and since they can't gank you very easily under towers in the early game because of how much damage they deal, it makes you a lot safer. As a result, any ganker will have to burst you down instantly, or watch you get away at 1 HP knowing they can't dive your tower without giving up a kill. Because of the importance of equilibrium, do everything in your power to keep it as close to the tower as possible without getting it in range, because if you get it in range, then the next creep wave will push. You can pull a side camp, hit your own creeps the second they drop below half health, draw aggro to kill your range creep, or even trick the enemy into using one of their AoE spells on your creeps to get the wave under control. If the wave pushes too far back, then tank the creeps right outside of the tower's range to make sure the next wave doesn't push. If you do all of this correctly, you will have successfully survived the early game and are now ready to enter the dreaded mid game. Now, arguably the most important aspect of staying alive in the mid game is teamfighting. This is where your decisions in the early game start to have a larger or smaller impact depending on how you play these engagements. It's possible that you could turn around a huge deficit by picking off an enemy core, or you could lose the game for your team. But in order to turn it around or solidify a lead, it's essential that you identify your role and play it to the best of your ability. I'll go through each one of these individually and give you some quick tips and general advice to die less in fights. So let's start with initiators and tanks, and I lump these guys into the same role because generally they want to start a fight, and they also want to be somewhere on the front lines, and they have pretty similar guidelines. Generally these guys have kits that will give them power to soak up damage and make sure your team stays alive. Now the first and most important thing I want to mention is you should never run in 1v5, die, and then rage ping your team because they didn't run in with you. It's always better to be late to the initiation or front lines than to be dead where you can't help your team at all. So sit back and wait for you to have good vision of the enemy team and a good way to initiate before going in. If your skills are on cooldown or you're not well hidden, you run the risk of getting blown up right at the start and losing the game for your team. And once again, if you lose these small engagements, you risk losing larger engagements later on. It snowballs and snowballs out of control and eventually you just lose the game. Now let's say you're a nuker, support, and sometimes like a disabler, right? You're the kind of hero that generally wants to stay in the back lines. See, the goal of your role is to consistently get off your spells multiple times in a fight without dying. And because your kit is so squishy, it's important that you learn how to stay alive. Now the first thing you should do is open up a practice lobby and test the range of your spells, as well as like the spells that give you trouble in fights. Let's say you're always getting killed by Axis Call or Black Hole or something like that. The goal is to always be out of range of their abilities while you're in range of yours. Now a super simple, quick and easy way to do this is to just stand behind your tank in a fight. Because if you think about it logically, their range stops where your tank starts, and your range goes beyond your tank. So you're kinda like a sniper. No one else knows they're punching bags for your own personal benefit, but you do. Last but not least, let's get into carries. Now carries are super tricky because they're like clay. You know, they start out soft and squishy, but eventually they fill a mold and get a roll. Now every carry is different, just like every hero is different, because their strength relies mostly on items instead of abilities. You know, Spectre generally wants to build tanky, so try following the rule for tanks and initiators. Anti-Mage prefers kiting and dealing lots of damage in team fights, so use your blink to kite the enemy like any other spell. Find out what your hero normally likes, and what I talked about earlier, find out what will be perfect for this game specifically. You want to think who you can counter with your items and playstyle. Or you know, you could just pick PA, kite, nuke, and carry and tank all at once. At least until 3k, right? Next up, let's talk about disengaging from a team fight safely. And once again, we'll start with tanks. Now this is where I run into a little bit of a brick wall, because I mean, come on, you're a tank. You're not supposed to end fights, you're supposed to start them. But if you do find yourself trying to end a fight as a tank, let me just be completely honest with you. Your main priority is not yourself, it's getting everyone else out safe. So if you don't have a mic, it's okay. Just pause the game, go to Best Buy, get a mic, plug it in, and scream run as loud as you can in voice chat. You know, maybe you'll get lucky and the enemy will focus your supports instead of you. But let's say you are a support, or a nuker, or a disabler. Your goal is to use any of your spells to slow the enemy down, while also always staying behind your tank. If you can stop them while keeping your position, you could get him out too, freeing up space on the map, getting information on where the enemy is, and giving your carry potential free farm. If he didn't already run in and die 1v5, that is. As a carry, again, your method of escape varies as much as your skill set or item build. Got a way to disjoint projectiles, like a blink or something? Use it. Save it for when they throw out a single target stun on you. Got a slow or something like that? Well, now you've got a way of deterring the enemy from chasing you or your supports. Juke into the trees and get a free TP out. If you don't have any natural escape methods, you're going to have to try to anticipate fights in your mind ahead of them happening. From the start of the game, think, what items do I need to buy to survive against their team? Sometimes you build damage to kill them before they kill you, sometimes it's a BKB, maybe it's a heart, maybe it's a blink dagger. Whatever it is, you want to build items that suit your hero while countering the enemy's plans. The better you can analyze what you need, the more equipped you are to handle their team. Alright, so last but not least, we're going to talk about farming safely. Now, this is one of the most important things we can discuss in a game, because farming safely involves vision, it involves map awareness, it involves being able to coordinate with your teammates, it involves warding, it involves everything. Farming is the heart of Dota, and it's the one thing that ties together the early, mid, and late game. So knowing how to farm without randomly dying 27 times in a game is imperative to your success as a carry, as a mid, and sometimes even a support when it's greedy. Okay, so let's get started. So the most important thing to keep in mind while playing any farming role is gathering information so that you don't die while you're farming, because that can set you back like 3 minutes. So to do this, we're going to be using wards, heroes, and creep waves. So let's start with wards, and let me preface this by saying you should have a support that wards for you, but like, come on man, a jungle creep gives you enough money to buy a ward, and chances are you're more mobile and tankier than your support. So even if you're a carry or a mid or an off lane, don't be afraid to buy wards for your team. But now let's talk about maximizing warding value so you can keep yourself alive or your teammates alive while they're farming. To do this, you need to think of what you want out of wards. Now the main goal of a ward is to figure out where the enemy is, where they're going, and where they're farming. If you had 100% vision of the enemy, the entire game, you would most likely never die, because you could always sidestep them, you could always avoid them. So our goal with warding is to try to get as close as possible to always being able to see the enemy. Now, this isn't an in-depth warding guide, it's just how to read wards and how to not die from them, so I'll very basically go over the concept of warding. See, if you think about Dota logically, the map is divided into lines that cut diagonally across it. Towers show up where these rough lines are, with the largest being the river in the middle. Now, you can abuse the fact that the map works along these lines and ward across them. Let's say you've taken the enemy tier 1s. Great! Now ward along the lines either where they used to be or where their tier 2s are, so you can focus on taking your next objective. If you're trying to end the game early, it's usually better to place the latter, while if you're trying to play more defensively, it's usually better to get vision of where they're farming and all that stuff. Let's say you're about to take an enemy tower. Well, to do that, you want vision of people who possibly are coming in to defend it. So try placing wards along the lines where their towers are, that way you can have vision of where they're most likely to be. Let's say you suspect an enemy's coming to take yours, or they've already taken your tower. Well, again, you want to ward along those lines so that you know where they're going to be with most certainty. Now, let's say you have 2 or 3 wards up and you still don't see them. Well, you can abuse this fact too. Now you know that they're either smoked or they're not on the map. Maybe they're farming more passively than your warding shows. Maybe they know you're about to hit a power spike, so they're playing in the back, or maybe they're playing super aggressive and you didn't account for that. You just want to think in their minds, you want to get in their minds, you want to think what's most logical for them to do, and then account for it. The next step is to put up wards that protect and grant vision along the lines where it's safe to farm. Now in general, unless you're like a Juggernaut or an Anti-Mage or something like that, you want to farm up to and behind the lines where you have towers, because it's very difficult to gank you from there. You can't smoke past the tower. However, if these towers fall, you can still protect yourself with wards. And to my next point, creep waves. Now to understand creep waves, we have to first take a look at their purpose. Creeps in the early game are used as a deterrent for enemies to dive. After all, 4 creeps are about as strong as any hero level 1. The later the game progresses, however, the more creep waves are used to grant vision, like a moving ward that goes along these aforementioned lines across the map. Pushing these waves out not only allows you to farm, but also grant vision for yourself and for your team, showing where you can and can't farm safely. As with wards and towers, it generally isn't a good idea to farm past the line where your creeps are. This is territory where the enemy could be farming, ganking, or have vision over you. The farther you move out from these lines, the more likely you are to die. And a quick side note here, you don't want to stay on the creep wave for too long. If you farm 2, maybe 3 creep waves, there's a high chance you just cross the line into the enemy territory. And here's one final tip for carries. Let's say you're a carry without split pushing mechanisms, or maybe you just want to stay in lane and farm up for 80 minutes. Either way, there's a quick trick I can teach you that'll let you farm the jungle and the lane while still keeping the lane creeps close to your tower. Every second creep wave of the minute, auto-attack the range creep and proceed to attack any enemy melee that isn't being attacked by your range creep. Then move in for last hits when necessary. This will push out the wave and grant you temporary vision of anyone coming to gank you. Then, at the 53-second mark, pull the side camp to your creep wave and let the neutrals attack you once. This will pull the lane back and reset the creep equilibrium. It will also stack the camp, giving you the gold from a new camp as if you took the last one. Repeat until you can take the stack. Farm the lane and the jungle all within the minute. Also, don't dive enemy towers minute 1 to get a kill on a guy with 1 health. He's zoned out of lane and can't come back. That's potentially worse than being dead, and is not worth giving up first blood to not get a kill. You know who you are, and you know you've done this in your pubs. But yeah, that's just about it. Thank you for watching and giving this guide a listen. If you really enjoyed it, go check out my Twitch stream where I test this stuff live. The last game I played on stream was a 25-1 Juggernaut game I had, where I theory crafted some stuff and tried to die least as possible. I'm always looking to play with viewers and have a great time, but that's about it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Let me know if I should make more of these or something like that. I've got a couple of ideas in the works. But thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye.